This is a City AM Studios production.
Hello and welcome back to Business as Usual with me, Martin Kimber.
And me, Matt Kenyon. Coming up on the podcast, Andy Burnham has a new job.
In the 1980s, Britain took some wrong turns. Political power was centralised. Economic power privatised. Large parts of the country deindustrialised.
We'll look at what lies ahead in Prime Minister Burnham's first 100 days.
In with the new, out with the old, Sir Keir Starmer bids farewell to the nation.
I go with good grace, I go with a smile, and I go proud of everything that we have achieved. Thank you very much.
What is Starmer's legacy, if he has one at all?
Plus, how good a communicator really is the new Prime Minister? Well, welcome back. It is Andy Burnham's first full day as Prime Minister. We're going to be bringing you reaction from the city, from business, and of course, we'll be talking about the politics of it all as well.
I bet he had some Sunday scaries on Sunday.
I would. I'd be so nervous, especially if I'd wanted it for 20 years and tried to go for it twice before.
What if I'm crap at it?
Yeah.
But first, let's recap what happened on Monday as the former Manchester mayor took over the reins from Sir Keir Starmer following the outgoing Prime Minister's final goodbye outside Downing Street.
I am confident that Britain is now stronger and fairer than it was 2 years ago. Our economy is stronger. Our public services are on the up, with the biggest fall in waiting times for 17 years. Children are being lifted out of poverty every single day. Immigration is down significantly. Our defence and security are on a far stronger footing, and our international reputation is greatly enhanced.
And back outside Downing Street, but this time without a lectern, the new PM, Burnham, promised to lay out a 10-year plan for Britain. But we're not going to hear about it just quite yet.
Later this year, I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where I believe we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support.
It was quite a brief speech, but with some big promises. But he did make one big central policy pledge.
I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
There is a fair bit to talk about, and joining us to break it all down is our Westminster Watching City Editor, Simon Hunt.
Morning. And I do wonder if Starmer might have just stolen that lectern as an act of revenge as he was leaving Downing Street.
I think I saw them pack it in the back of that Audi that he left in, like trying to cram it into the back seat.
Well, it's funny because for a while, every PM had their own distinctive lectern, and like Liz Truss had the twisty geometric one, but perhaps the most abstract shape you can have is no lectern at all. So that was Burnham's big win. Simon, he talked for not very long, only for a few minutes, and it was probably less substantial than we expected, but there were some interesting bits. What did you make of the speech?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very brief speech. I think it was immediately obvious that Burnham has a bit more charisma, a bit more, he's able to have more of a repartee with the public in a way that Starmer could never.
Woof.
But there was very little in the way of detail, but some pretty bold visions that he has for his time in office. He says he wants to make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in 40 years with a new political model and a new economic model. So this is not, we'll change a bit here, we'll tinker around with this. This is he wants to rewrite the economics of the UK. I don't know how you do that, but this is what he wants to do.
Well, with a 10-year plan, no less.
Yeah.
I love this narrative he has of like the coups stop now, the churn stops now.
Yeah.
More new prime ministers.
Now that I'm in, it stops.
that last palace coup that'll be the final one we do.
Yeah. And I suppose it's interesting that he says that, because obviously he's seen the rate at which prime ministers have been replaced the last few years and doesn't want to be the next one. But at the same time, there is talk and sort of chatter in Westminster about whether he is gearing Labour up for a 2027 election because he's seen the pace with which the honeymoon phase of a Prime Minister's term in office evaporates. That's normally sort of within 12 months, so he needs to get his act together pretty quickly if he wants to
12
survive
months
in Downing
generous.
Street.
Yeah, about 12 days for Starmer.
Yeah.
But I mean, we after the speech, everyone kind of looked around at each other in the newsroom being like, well, what was that? But there was one substantive point in which he's already managed to spend money within the sort of 4 minutes he was speaking.
Yes, so he has said that he wants to set up some kind of 10-year plan later in the year. We don't know really any of the details of that at all at this stage, but we do know about his first actual policy announcement as Prime Minister, and that is to end rough sleeping. That's quite an interesting one to go with because it's not an easy task. I mean, plenty of governments in the past have had various different commitments to ending homelessness. Rishi Sunak had a go. It's clearly not worked. And B, it's not a particularly cheap policy either. So the Sunak, when Sunak was in number 11, he committed something in the order of £750 million a year to end rough sleeping. That was partly by housing tens of thousands of people during the pandemic. And so, that adjusted for inflation would be closer to something like £1 billion a year now. And it's a policy that you can't, it's not a one and done policy where you spend this money and thereby end all homelessness forever.
It's not a circuit breaker.
No, it's something that literally would take years of continued investment. And maybe this is another thing where actually, because it would take so long to deliver, there's no expectation that it can be delivered ahead of the next general election. And so there's no actual metric by which to judge it.
But like £1 billion a year doesn't actually, it sounds like a lot, but when you compare that to the 20 plus billion they were going to spend on carbon capture, when you compare that to what was briefed over the weekend about foreign aid, and in comparison with a lot of other states spending, when you compare it with the pension and the triple lock, we don't want to anger the boomers that listen, but in comparison with that, $1 billion ain't that much. So
yes,
you do...
well, that's certainly true. But without wishing to sound heartless, on a sort of per capita basis, it is really a lot of money. I mean, if you look at the number of people that were found accommodation, that the government found accommodation for during the pandemic versus the spend, we're talking about something like 20 to 30,000 a year per person. So this is quite an expensive policy when you weigh it up in those terms.
It's also worth saying that Manchester, which was always held up as a panacea and very much the reason why Burnham is in, because it represents his record, is not a panacea for ending rough sleeping, where it's still very much a problem there and a problem which has been rising.
And do you know which local authority has the highest level of rough sleeping? Westminster. So it will literally be on Burnham's doorstep that this will be a visible problem if he doesn't deal with it in the way he's promised to.
Another thing I just want to pull up, because, I mean, we're focusing on the rough sleeping aspect because it was really the one specific thing he brought up. But there is now talk of this 10-year plan for Britain later on in the year. That could be, I suppose, just before September. That could be in late November. That could represent the budget.
Probably pre-budget, right?
You think it would be tied into the budget. I suppose, how long can Burnham leave it without saying something more substantial? I'm quite surprised that he hasn't already.
What is it going to mean for inward investment and business decisions being put off until this plan is sort of set out?
I think there's also maybe in it there's a desire to slightly rewrite the fiscal framework somewhat, because a lot of the time budgets are based on a sort of 5-year time horizon. So if he immediately starts talking about a 10-year model, he can push out those debt requirements or spending requirements over a longer horizon to try and spread them out more evenly, I guess. I don't know. That's one thought.
That's a good point. Just one more question for you, Simon, just before we leave, because we're running out of time a bit. Are you a problem solver or a point scorer?
I'm very much
Multiple
both.
choice.
I think you can solve the problem by scoring points.
Yeah.
That's
what Spain did.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Simon, that's all we have time for, but there'll be lots more to talk about as the week goes on. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now, just time for some other stories making the business headlines that may have gotten a little lost in the political hullabaloo. Self-storage operator Yellow has continued to trim its headcount and hike investment into automation in a bid to cut staff costs. That's as the company continues to deal with the fallout of Rachel Reeves' decision to hike business rates and the minimum wage in the 2024 budget.
Meanwhile, shares in healthcare services firm Craneware tumbled in early trading on Monday as it revealed that it's been hit by a cyber attack. The AIM-listed business said that early investigations suggest a significant volume of file names were viewed and exfiltrated, which is a great verb.
It is. And Ryanair has seen its profit drop. drop by more than a third as rising jet fuel prices triggered by the war in Iran begin to take effect. The airline saw its operating costs jump 11% due to fuel rising to $150 a barrel.
Right, so coming up after the break, what does a new Andy Burnham premiership mean for public utilities such as water? And what does it mean more broadly for our political landscape? Don't go anywhere.
Now, in his maiden speech, our Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, talked about taking back industries into much greater public control. That comes, of course, against the backdrop of stakeholders in Thames Water battling to keep the company out of government hands. Joining us for the latest is City AM's Deputy Editor, Charlie Conchie. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
What is the latest on this ongoing saga?
This really is an ongoing saga. Just to, I suppose, recap a bit, it's been several years of crisis, really, for Thames Water. It's been struggling under this nearly £20 billion debt pile, really trying to fend off nationalisation. The reporting and the suggestion from government has always been that there is the threat there of this special administration regime, a means of kind of taking Thames Water into temporary public control. We had Thames Water accounts last week as well. They revealed that there was just enough cash to last until the end of this year. So it's all coming together at a time when Andy Burnham's obviously coming into power, and it is going to be one of his first real challenges to tackle as Prime Minister. He's been quite vague and sort of conflicting on his stance on Thames Water in some ways. He did previously say it should be nationalised in an interview with The Guardian. He then has used the kind of softer language of greater public control and deliberately almost holding back that word of nationalisation. A couple of big developments over the weekend, though. There was this reporting that suggested that Burnham was preparing to take Thames into this special administration regime, a temporary form of nationalisation. We've also had a sort of update from the other party in this, which is the creditors to Thames Water. They've been putting forward a plan to try and take over Thames Water, keep it within private hands. They committed to invest billions of pounds in sort of replenishing the infrastructure. They did ask for some leniency on the fines that Thames Water has faced for things like pollution and sewage spills. That now doesn't look to be going forward. It looks like nationalisation is essentially the favoured option for the Burnham government. We're just waiting now on some details, and there were perhaps a few allusions to it in the speech today, talking of taking life's essentials into greater public control. So we're still waiting for some of the details to be fleshed out there, but it does look to be heading in that direction.
Which the chief executive, Chris Weston at Thames Water, might say is a little unfair, given that a lot of the figures for Thames Water are kind of going in the right direction, like fewer sewage spills and, you know, greater infrastructure improvements and stuff like that. Like, it is, you know, he's been given a tough job, Chris Weston.
I don't think anyone envies him that.
No.
Job, no.
And he earns considerably less than a lot of other water bosses do at other sort of companies. But at the same time, Andy Burnham might think, well, if I nationalise this one, that'll kind of scare the others into kind of doing a better job.
That is potentially one way of reading it. I think the interesting point here, and the really sort of hard numerical point, is just the cost that this is going to inflict on the taxpayer as well. So this is not an easy job of nationalising a company and keeping it going. I mean, some reports have suggested, there was a report done a couple of years ago by Teneo, the administration firm which had handled the bulb administration, which was a similar special administration regime. They estimated, using that as a kind of guide, that the cost of 18 months in the special administration regime could cost a taxpayer up to £4 billion, just around the £4 billion mark. There's obviously knock-ons as well. Suppliers will charge more to a company in special administration. Lenders may charge more punitive interest rates to borrow money as well. So this is going to saddle the taxpayer ultimately with a huge amount of cost if this does move ahead. And there is now this other option on the table. They've been willing to bend slightly and say they are willing to maybe offer a sort of golden share to government, offer some sort of split private-public ownership model. I mean, we revealed over the weekend that neither party, either Thames, the creditors, and Burnham's camp had actually sat down to talk yet. So there are no ongoing negotiations. Thames are in the dark. The creditors are in the dark. The only people who seem to know are those around Burnham, and they're holding their cards fairly close to their chest at the moment.
It's a tricky political look as well, because just as they open Number 10 North and pledge to end this, what Burnham would describe as a great South bias in our politics, one of the first acts the government might have to do is plough £4 billion a year into a southern utility.
Yeah, it's again, it just points to how knotty this horrible political challenge is waiting for Burnham. There's obviously the point on this north-south divide, but ultimately this is part of Burnham's greater public control of utilities agenda, which he, whilst changing the language slightly, has been quite clear in his desire to take these kind of companies slightly closer to government. So yes, the north-south divide angle is maybe one way of looking at it. I think this greater public control of utilities could be another as well.
Charlie Conchie, City AM's Aquaman, our own Jason Momoa, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, it's always a big set-piece moment when a new Prime Minister addresses the nation for the very first time. And it is a moment which is very slightly less momentous these days because it seems to happen every other year. But how will Burnham's debut to the nation be remembered? Well, our opinion editor, Alys Denby, has some thoughts. Alys, welcome.
Hello. I mean, look, you're right that we've been through this all before. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be slightly outraged that we're getting a new Prime Minister with a very different agenda, promising huge sweeping changes for which no one has voted. Okay, so let's not forget he has absolutely no mandate for this. As for what that agenda represents, Oasis say don't look back in anger. But to me, this whole agenda is just a hackneyed 80s socialist talking point about unwinding 40 years of neoliberalism. It's completely backward looking. Andy Burnham played a huge part in those 40 years of neoliberalism. He was in the cabinet for 3 of them, Labour in charge for 15. All he seems to want to do is to take us back to the 1970s, renationalise industry, regulate, tax, massively expand the state. And I think he just doesn't understand basic economics. He says that it's only by taking public control of life's essentials that you can drive down their cost. That's not what drives prices down. What drives prices down is competition.
I think something quite unnerving about some of the surprise around what he's saying, because there wasn't that much briefing to the press, but there also wasn't very much of a preview of what he was going to say because there was no leadership election. So it feels like we're having the very opening stages of the Labour leadership election in front of Downing Street as he prepares to go in and implement a massive new agenda. Do you think he's going to be able to keep public opinion on side as he does this? Because people only went to the polls, as you said, a couple of years ago. This could be quite different. What's he going to have to do to get this through and keep himself at relatively stable levels of popularity?
Look, to be honest, I think this is going to be the high point of his popularity. I think he's going to get in there and going to realise that he has very little fiscal room for manoeuvre. What's he going to do to make people immediately, right now, tomorrow, feel better off that doesn't actually harm the economy in some way? But look, I will say this for him, is that I think we saw with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves that coming in with a very doomy, gloomy narrative and talking down the economy and saying how hard everything is going to be can actively harm the economy. So his kind of sunnier, chirpier, more social media friendly vibe is in itself a good thing. I just don't know how long it will survive contact with reality.
I actually was thinking of pitching you an opinion piece because I don't know what the word neoliberal means. It seems to mean a million different things to a million different people. I've never met anyone in the city who calls themselves a neoliberal. Someone who's pro-market, someone who's pro-free market. You don't say, "Hi, I'm Martin. I'm a neoliberal."
No.
It just seems to be a pejorative word used by people on the left. Do we think he is now anti-Tony Blair's globalist free marketeer neoliberalism, or is he anti sort of Donald Trump's more authoritarian, inward-looking, tariffy kind of neoliberalism? Do we know what his objection actually is?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I make this point in the leader I've just written that neoliberalism is a term that's meaningless to anybody who actually supports free markets, and it's used only by critics to vaguely mean that Thatcher was bad. I honestly think that this is just a sort of Labour Party narrative that only pleases a certain base, especially in the north, where experienced rapid deindustrialisation under Thatcher. But the point is, I mean, even if you look at Manchester and the undeniable success and growth of that city, it is basically down to what he would call neoliberalism. It's crowding in private investment, and it's also moving away from industrial jobs towards service-led jobs. And that's now what he's saying he wants to undo. He wants to undo his own progress.
Well, I mean, we will see how it pans out for him. But if only because we're running out of space on our podcast hosting platform and we need to keep the episodes tight this week. Thank you very much for coming in, Alys.
Absolute pleasure, as always.
Thank you, Alys.
Well, that's just about all we have time for today. Thank you very much for listening to Business as Usual.
As ever, don't forget to subscribe to City AM's daily and weekly newsletters. And of course, don't forget to download our free app.
And don't forget to vote in the Toast Awards 2026 for your favourite hospitality venue in the Square Mile. We'll be back in your podcast feeds tomorrow at 6 a.m. unless podcasts have been taxed or something by then. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.